live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Welcome, everyone, to the Just Bernard Show here on my many platforms across the interwebs, as we like to say these days. Anyway, I'm so glad to have you all here today. I've got a very interesting topic and a very interesting guest joining us today. We are going to be talking about mindfulness within gardening, or gardening and mindfulness. I know a lot of you are wart cunners out there, and I'm sure you will really enjoy this topic. I hope to learn something from it. Gosh knows I need to learn a little bit more about gardening, especially with the spring coming. We all like nature, and it's nice to go visit nature, but isn't it even nicer when you can create it within your own environment? So I'm looking forward to speak to Joann about that. But I just want to tell you all, I just want to again welcome all of you, as some of you are logging on. Hello, it's good to see you. I'm so glad that you're here. This last week has been kind of mellow in a good way, I guess. I will say that next week we will be celebrating the spring equinox. So be sure to prepare for that. And it's, again, a great time to plant some seeds of intention of what you'd like to bring into your life. So think about that. And perhaps maybe something that we learn here today we'll be able to apply to next week's online ceremony. So without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about my guest. Joann Calabrese is in Denver, and she is a skilled wellness, mindfulness, and recovery educator, a lifelong organic gardener and herbalist. She is experienced in meditation, ritual work, qigong, and tai chi. Her passion is sharing how these intersecting practices can lead to more connectedness in the world through workshops and coaching. So welcome to the show, Joann. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Through workshops and coaching. Well, I'm so glad to have your ear, especially during this time of the year. Like I said, spring is coming. And I really love the idea and concept of your book, and we'll talk more about that. Let me see if the cover will show up. Yep, Growing Mindful. It's a beautiful cover, but the idea of a book of gardening and mindfulness combined is a great concept to me, especially as someone who practices earth spirituality. It's a great thing. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the practice of gardening and of mindfulness through gardening, or vice versa.
The short story is, I'll go back though. My grandfather, all my grandparents were Italian immigrants. My one grandfather had a huge garden. So my earliest memories are running through that garden with my cousins. He actually let us do that, like play hide and seek amongst the corn. So I have these vivid memories of that. My parents both gardened. My father had apple trees. And so real early on, I was around gardens, involved in gardens, started my family early on. And so growing a vegetable garden was really important to me. And there was kind of that track, loved it, loved being out in nature. And at the same time, real early on in my early 20s, started a meditation practice. And I think it was at the point that I got into movement meditation. So Tai Chi, Qigong, something switched for me, or opened up for me, I guess I should say. It's like, well, you can practice mindfulness and meditation in all of this movement, and they just began to kind of blend together. And I think the other piece, because you know how our lives are, they kind of weave together. It's hard to pull out one thread. But being into reading about, researching, learning about medicinal herbs, and that connection where we're intuitive with the plants, and certainly all of the early herbalists, the people who knew plant medicine, were tuning into what was happening with that plant and communicating. And so things just shifted. It was over a period of time. In 2013, I started a blog, just kind of my musings about this interconnection, and one thing led to the other. And I felt like I wanted to make it more available to people. So the book happened.
That's very cool. And I love, well, I just love the way, like you said, you interweave so much of the, similarities, parallels, everything from the plant energies and meditations that you can do with them, and et cetera, within the book. But I'm going to jump right in and ask you, as someone, and I'm sure a lot of my viewers are going to be thinking the same thing, someone who doesn't necessarily have a green thumb. Now, many of us who practice our spirituality, I love my nature walks. I love being outside, listening to the wind go through the trees, and I incorporate that into my own spiritual practice. I prefer to do ritual outside, but I don't necessarily have a very good green thumb. Either I overwater, I underwater, I don't know if I'm planting in the right time or whatnot. So for those of us, I guess many of us will be watching here in North America and the United States. And I know this is an easy answer for you, I'm sure, maybe not, I don't know. What would be an easy way to get started? An easy plant to start with, a type of plant? What can get us involved in building that relationship with a living organism like a plant?
Sure. Well, two suggestions. One is that I just want to say you don't have to be a gardener to be mindful with gardens and with the green world. It's hard for me to imagine people not wanting to garden, but you don't have to. So a lot of the activities in the book about just going out and relating to plants can be done at a park, with a neighbor's garden, that kind of thing. And one thing I recommend to people to get started is to find one plant. Because if you're in North America, winter is going to come and fall. So a tree is best, or a large shrub that doesn't disappear in the winter, and start a relationship with that plant. So if it's in your neighborhood on a daily walk, you tune into what's going on with that plant. We spend so much of our life thinking of the green world as background, but bringing it into the foreground, it's a living being. So if you don't want to talk out loud to it, you don't have to, but recognizing how amazing this plant is, tree, shrub, whatever you're communing with, and really be attentive to it. Notice the changes. If you can go daily, that's a great way to start. So that's one thing. If you do want to garden, I think doing some research around plants that are easy to grow in your area. Denver was a big transition for me from Pennsylvania, where things just grow a lot easier because water falls from the sky on a regular basis in Pennsylvania. I have currant bushes now that I never grew in Pennsylvania, but I did some research. They're prolific. I hardly have to do anything with them. So that was some research I did. A lot of the weedier medicinal plants are pretty easy to grow. I love yarrow. It's a healing plant, has a lot of healing energy to it. That's a pretty easy one to grow almost anywhere. People might laugh about this, but there are heirloom kinds of dandelion. And as we know, dandelions love to grow anywhere.
Yeah.
I saw in my Baker Creek seed catalog, they have pink dandelions. And of course, the roots are really nutritious, the leaves are nutritious, and I think it would be hard for you to kill those.
That's good to know. Now, and I don't want to turn this into how to grow a plant show, but what are, for those of us like myself, now I'm very lucky. I've set up the office in my home next to the front window where I get lots of sunlight. I have a bush that I have a relationship with. I see the bush outside the window every day, and I can see how the seasons are turning and the leaves turn with the trees across the street. So is that a way that a person can start developing a relationship with a plant, even if you're just indoor and looking outside?
Yes, yes, you can do it through that window. If you want to get more in depth, I also suggest taking a sketchbook and trying to sketch a plant. And that's not about art. It doesn't have to be something you're going to frame and put on your wall. But when we take the time to put a pencil to paper, and really, it helps us really tune in to the plant, and we'll notice changes in the plant more easily.
Oh, that's pretty good idea, actually. Yeah, if you're a good sketcher. So, Joann, as far as let's say incorporating gardens, plant life, etc., into our spiritual practice or mindfulness practices, what do you practice yourself, and what would you recommend for us?
There's such a range. There's such a range of things. So if I am doing a specific kind of ritual or celebration, I always want to be thoughtful about plants that I'm going to have on the altar and what they represent. And you can look up some of those kinds of things. So I think that's a starting point. But I think, again, with just gardening itself, can be a spiritual practice. So we approach the activity itself as this opening the doorway to deeper connection to the whole planet. I think keeping in mind what's happening when we're gardening, that again, in our culture, it's kind of we're the doers and the makers, but it's really much more of co-creation. Mm-hmm. There are microorganisms in the soil. There are all of these entities. The plants are living entities, and we're co-creating with them. So if we approach gardening from that mindset and that perspective, that itself becomes part of the spiritual practice.
I can see how, and you brought something up. I had an aha moment as you were saying that, where the soil is actually one of the things that I overlook, and that probably leads to my plants not being happy. I forget to, fertilize the soil, or I forget to change out the soil. So that was a big aha moment for me just there. But looking at it, like you just said, the whole, the interconnectedness of it all, the soil, the sun, the water, our energy, our caring for it, and how that really does create, like you said, like a symbiotic relationship, can accentuate our own spiritual practice. With that being said, what are your thoughts on the idea that I don't want to sound cheesy, but I'm going to sound cheesy. The idea of plants as hosts for elemental energies and/or elemental spirits, beings, and how that can aid in our spiritual practice.
I think the world is a really complex place, and that if we take the time to tune in, we might tap into those energies. And there are specific plants that are going to hold more of those energetic forms than another. For example, any of the plants that are deep rooted, like comfrey, dandelion, burdock, have a real earthy energy to them. They exemplify it. They have a deep tap root. So again, when we're tapping into that, we're co-creating things. So I'm open to any possibilities. Is it me thinking it's earth energy, or is the plant reflecting earth energy to me? Is it channeling it through? And at the end of the day, I've come to this point in my life. When I was younger, it was real important for me to know what's exactly happening. And I'm at this point, like, I don't know that it matters if I can pinpoint what's happening, but when I'm working intuitively and it's sensing this energy and it's working for me, then it's working for me. So yeah, that's my take on working with the energies.
And I like that you talked about the working with it intuitively. And for me, it's again, I'm not a good gardener, but I can only relate to it as perhaps a writer, or decorating my home or decorating my altar. It becomes an intuitive relationship. Yeah. Where you're not necessarily following guidelines or step by step, but you're kind of sensing the energy of the plant and or the surroundings. are there specific ways that people can develop their own garden? Like, let's say, for example, is it the spiritual energies, are they different if you're planting in the north part of your property, the east, the west, of course, the sun and the soil? But are there certain plants that are associated with those particular directions and or elements of those directions?
So there's definitely plants that are associated with different directions, but when you're planting, you're still going to want to be conscious of where the shade is and where, where the sunshine is, that kind of thing. Again, a number of the earth-centered plants are going to be the ones that are deeply rooted. The plants that have to do with air tend to be the ones that have the little seed pods that, amaranth, yarrow, that you just see kind of floating in the air. The hotter plants, the ones that invoke that hot energy, have the element of the sun. So the hot peppers, mustard, that kind of thing. So you definitely can plant from that perspective, and you could actually lay out a circle garden honoring those different kinds of plants for sure.
Yeah, and that's my dream garden, actually.
Nice.
I have this image of a giant pentagram pathway with little different plants acknowledging the different energies for that particular quarter, and of course lavender's in there because I love lavender. And actually that turns me to a personal question that I actually am, because of your book. I want you to know you've inspired me already. Because of your book, I'm going to take the plunge and I am going to try to grow lavender. Me and my one of my apprentices have already started. Well, she's started. I'm about to get started. And I don't know if she's making it too complicated or if I'm too oversimplifying. But let's say a plant like lavender. Everyone loves lavender right now. Purple happens to be my most favorite color that I surround myself with and has been a part of my life since I was a child. And so what would be the best way to get, let's say, a lavender container started?
Well, the easiest way is to go to the greenhouse and get a lavender plant, but you can start them from seed as well. The thing with lavender is there are a lot of different varieties. So once again, you want to check with your zone. You're in Virginia, I think.
Yeah.
That's zone 5 probably. And make sure that... Oh.
Thank you for pointing that out. We have to cover that in a minute.
Right. Well, so most states, I think all states, have what's called a county or an extension office. And if you look that up, I'm not sure why it's called an extension office. It comes from some old school when people were doing more agriculture, but they have a lot of information on plants, and especially information on plants that will grow in your area. So you might check on that. If you look, any good seed catalog is going to give you a lot of selections for lavender plants. And so finding something that is the height that you want and just meets the requirements for your growing area, that would be the first thing. So again, if you go to a reputable greenhouse, they're going to have plants that do well in your area. And as a first time planting a lavender, you might want to just do that. Might be easiest.
Well, thank you for your honesty. Don't do it yourself. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, she, as I was saying, my friend she's germinating them. And I think she's, now they're in the stage where she's supposed to keep them in the refrigerator for a few days. And I'm like, all this for a piece of lavender? Maybe I'll go to the greenhouse. So, in your book, Joann, you have a lot of wonderful exercises. And not only that, you seem to have like, well, you do have kind of like a week by week, I don't know what word you want to use, exercises or whatnot for every week. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what can we learn from practicing these exercises?
Yeah, so that's the second part of the book, because the first part you can just kind of jump in anywhere. The second part of the book has 52 different plants with their energetic correspondences. And that's, again, just attributes of the plant. And all plants, like people, have many different attributes. But for the book, I tuned into the one that felt most important with me and that relationship I have. So a way to work with plants and their correspondences, and you can do one a week, is to use it as a mindful focus. let that correspondence in that plant really filter your awareness for the week. And I have journal activities that I suggest. If they're edible plants, you can use them in your meals during the week. But the idea is, we're bombarded with stimuli every day, and it's hard to filter out. So if we have a kind of mindfulness anchor, which the correspondences can be, we can tune in, we can start in the morning, align ourselves with this correspondence, notice where it's showing up during the day. And then in the evening, we take time to reflect and again, just reinforce. And so I can give you an example. I write about amaranth in the book, and the correspondence for amaranth is grace. And there are at least two components to that. So amaranth, if you don't know, it's this huge, beautiful plant, beautiful plumes. I do a variety that's called red Hopi amaranth, and it can be used for dyes, but it's gorgeous. And people who know natural foods know that amaranth is very high in protein, the grain, lots of minerals, so very nutritious. So it's graceful, so it embodies grace. But there's another component to amaranth, and that's it was sacred to the Aztecs because it provided them with this highly nutritious food that grew in a kind of rough area to grow. It's very drought resistant. It sustained them in a harsh environment. And it was sacred because they realized without this plant, they probably wouldn't be able to survive. So there's a idea with grace where the universe kind of opens up and gives us blessings. And it's not something we've worked at. It's not something that we've done effort for. Those things are good too, but it's just the universe opens up and it's a state of grace. And so if we work with amaranth, we can read about it in the morning and align with that, and then be attentive during the day. Where are we noticing this? Where is it popping up for us? And then at the end of the day, we take time again to reflect. And the way I've set it up in the book is if people want, there's one plant for each week of the year if they would like to use it that way, but you don't have to. You can go in your yard and align with a plant. What's the energy that's coming from that plant? What's the correspondence for you? And how do you work with that? And the other thing I would say about this is it's not just thinking about it. It's a bringing it into the heart center and the solar plexus and really integrating that concept. So it's not just a thought process as we do it.
I love that. Thank you. And it's I love what you just said about what is the correspondence to you. That's a big aspect of the way that I teach. Yes, there are books of correspondences, but we may live. A good example was living in South Florida. The water is to the east. The ocean was to the east. So my students would say, well, why are we calling water to the west? I'm like, we can call water to the east if you like. It is to the east. If that makes better sense to you, let's do that. What are you feeling? What do you feel is water? And I can see where you can overlay this concept with the plant. So who's someone who's connecting with the plant, what would be a great way for them to pick? What are the things they're trying to pick up on to sense what the correspondence means for them? If we can just go into a tiny little bit more detail about that.
Yeah, I think developing again your intuition and giving yourself some time. Again, we live in a culture that's very, very busy, and people want things like this. It might take a little bit of time for you to shift and just tune into that plant, work with it for a while. What's emerging? Get a journal, start to just free form and write. And again, just taking some time to really tune in. I think the patience, the intention around it, ask the plant to reveal itself to you. What's this relationship about? And taking the time.
Absolutely. And we're almost running out of time, but I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to share if you don't want to, but if you are going to be performing or celebrating the spring equinox in Denver, Joann Calabrese, what kind of plants would you want to see on your altar?
Oh, spring plants. Well, daffodils, if you can get them. Again, everything's covered in snow right here. So daffodils, crocuses, and I always like to have fragrant things also on the altar. Um, Again, depending on where you are, I have little teeny lemon balms coming up. They're just starting to emerge. So it certainly wouldn't be in a vase of lemon balm, but um, lemon balm's all about renewal and refreshing energy. So that's a really cool springtime herb to use.
That's wonderful. Very good. Well, Joy, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so happy that we're here to kind of open our eyes up, and especially open my eyes up to the ability of our relationships with our garden and how they can incorporate into our own spiritual lives, and giving us the pointers that you gave us. Now, the name of the book is Growing Mindful, and it's from my favorite publisher, Llewellyn. And when did the book come out? Is it out already? And where can we find it?
So it came out in January. So any of your indie bookstores, but of course, Amazon, you can get it directly from Llewellyn. You can go to my website and there's a connection there. So lots of places.
Wonderful. And it says you teach workshops and whatnot. Where can people follow up with you to learn more about the work that you do with plants and just connect with you?
So my website is mindfulnessgardengames.com, and I have information there on how to contact me. I do have a few coaching clients, and we just did a mindfulness online circle, and I'm going to plan for another one probably the week before the summer solstice.
That sounds wonderful. Great. And I love the name. What is it? Mindfulness Games?
Mindfulness Garden Games.
Mindfulness Garden Games. I love that name.
Thank you.
Well, Joann, thank you so much for being here today. A very blessed solstice. Equinox to you. Enjoy the spring and all the good rebirth that comes along with it. And don't forget, everyone, it's Growing Mindful from Llewellyn Publishers. And next week, of course, we will be celebrating the spring equinox here ourselves. So have a wonderful week, everyone. I love you. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.